House.
It's up to you.
Okay. So, hi, this morning you are joining the Open Table Church in Mason, Ohio, and we welcome all of you. I'm Dale Likens, the pastor, and Brenda Buckwell will be leading us through a time of reflection on finding God during this pandemic time. So I will turn it over to Brenda.
So give me just a minute here to get the screen sharing slide open. And we have to do, all right, I think I'm all ready. So what we're about today, Dale and I were talking the other day and just thought, you know, this is a really tough season. I mean, we don't know what the mystery of tomorrow will bring as far as what the pandemic will do. We don't know how the injustices of the systemic racism will be changing the landscape of our culture. So there's a lot of things that we don't know, and we're not generally people that are very comfortable with mystery. We kind of like to see a mystery movie every once in a while. We might like a good mystery book. Maybe we'll even tolerate a surprise party. But living into mystery, letting go of control, leaning into God is often a very, very hard thing for us to do. And so what we're about today is looking for the hidden presence of God through this pandemic. We'll be using a source about St. Teresa and John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross, about the dark night of the soul. And so one of the things about this is that we don't see or feel the mystery of God sometimes. Like if you look at this picture right here, can you see the little stream that's going through those rocks? I mean, that's why there is a stone over the top that looks like that little platform stone, because it's a little bridge you can step on to walk over the little waterfall and the creek that is there. So you just have to take my word that it is there. And that's what it's like with the mystery of God. When we lean into the mystery of God, we cannot see the next thing. And so we'll be looking at that time. We'll end our time by talking about how we can reveal this hidden moment of God as community. The places that we're going today is the dance between the light and the shadow, because if we think about the hiddenness of God, the dark night of the soul, that hidden piece that we don't notice God in, would not be there without the light of Christ. Everything would just look dark. Everything would be in the shadows without having some light thrown on that. We know that if we walk outside during the day, and when it's at high noon, there is a whole lot less shadow than when it's toward evening time and that shadow elongates out before us, or early morning, the shadow elongates out. Afternoon is behind us, morning is before us. So then after we do a little bit of teaching here for the first half hour, we're going to have some practices and open up the microphones for y'all to give your responses. We'll look at the hidden wholeness by seeking God's presence through the hidden picture. You remember the hidden pictures from the Highlight magazine of when you were kids? And you have to look for the objects in those. So we're going to see how that helps us discern and know a little bit about God's hidden presence. And then finally, our last piece of it, we'll be looking to gain a new perspective as we look at a few optical illusions to know how that is so important to gain new perspective. And then many of you have sent in photographs that we will share with a prayer practice called Visio Divina, which Visio is Latin for seeing, Divina is divine. So we're going to be using that seeing God's presence through these pictures as a prayer time for us. So that's where we're headed. The source that we're using for the teaching part comes to us from Gerald May's book, The Dark Night of the Soul, and it's all on St. Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross. So to begin, let's look at an opening prayer. This is one that St. John wrote. He and Teresa are from the 16th century from Spain. So everything that they wrote is in Spanish and has been translated for us into English. So if you would take a moment and make sure you're muted as we have a silent prayer, and I will read through this poem for our opening prayer. And you think about if there's a word or a phrase that jumps out at you and speaks to you during this pandemic time. O living flame of love that tenderly wounds my soul in its deepest center, since now you are not oppressive, now consummate. If it be your will, tear through the veil of this sweet encounter. Sounds a little bit stuffy, sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but do we want our relationship to God to be a love affair? One that is so deep that sometimes it goes beyond the words. And that's what John is talking about. The deepness of this love that he knows and God knows for him, and wants it to be the fullness of his life, just like that rose picture, so that the whole being of ourself can be consumed with the love of God. Here we have a picture from the St. John's Bible in Collegeville, Minnesota at St. John's Abbey. It depicts for me the hiddenness of God. Teresa and John talk about that we need to find a way to notice deeper union with God. You know, a lot of times we say, oh, I'm seeking God, and we'll go and we want to have a prayer because Aunt Susie has a hangnail we're really worried about, or somebody's in the hospital and we're asking that for God's presence to be there. All of those are wonderful prayers, but we're talking about this deeper sense of when we're not quite sure we know that God is even present. Because, you know, the pandemic has been really tough, and some of us have lost income and lost our jobs, and some of us are just isolated, living down in our basement for 2 weeks while somebody has to serve them meals, you know, so that life has gotten shaken up from the way that we know it. And so instead of clinging to God, just hoping that God is there, we learn to trust that God is doing something even deeper within us that we don't know and cannot yet imagine. It means that everything that has been foundational to us feels like it's being shaken loose. So they say that this is not a lessening of the distance between me and God, because we don't get any closer to God because God's already within us. But it is an opening up of our conscious awareness of God. Hear the difference? Does that make sense, Dale? That the consciousness of God is when we're actually aware of God, and the union of God is there whether we're consciously aware of God or whether we're not. So that's the real problem of the dark night of the soul of this pandemic. We keep saying, where is God? Why did this happen? Why have all these people died? How come people are trying to decide mask, not mask? Do we go to school? Do we not go to school? What's the best way? The stress level is raised so greatly. And yet when we learn to lean into the mystery of God and allow it to become more of our conscious awareness, we're able to move a little bit further.
Brenda, I think that's something that I think that's something that, you know, I find myself reminding, well, myself of, but also others consistently. You know, we are, I think, needing to um, realize that God is always with us. You know, it's
Right. We
one
know.
of those foundational kind of promises that can get pushed to the background, or we forget very often because we're looking
Absolutely.
really, we
It's
want
that.
things to go away. You know, we want,
Mhm.
you know, that then shows us that God has done something, and it's like, well, God's promise is that God's just right there with you no matter
Mhm.
what happens.
Mhm.
So anyway, yeah, very, very true.
Right. So this is like a foundational tenet
Mm.
of Christianity, that we believe those promises. And there we got the distinction. We believe with our mind, but this deepening love we're talking about is with our heart.
Mm.
That we totally experience and trust that through what looks like the muddy, murky water of the mystery of tomorrow, God already knows the best way to love us into our best self of God's self within us. And so John and Teresa used two Spanish words to talk about this. The first one up on the screen is the OSURA. Everybody knows Spanish, you could say it better than I am if you want to cut in. But I say oscura, because if you think about it, look at that word obscure. See how closely related they are? That's why I use the image of the murky water for tomorrow. I don't know what tomorrow's going to be like. I can't guarantee that I can see what my future for my grandchildren and my children, or even myself, 3 months, 6 months down the way is going to be. Because there's a hiddenness of God. It's muddy and murky. And so when we talk about during this pandemic, leaning into the mystery of God, we are moving that from our belief system of our head into our heart, and really trusting what the prophet Jeremiah talks about in 29:11, where the promise is given that Dale was just referring to. I know, the Lord, Jeremiah says, I know the things of your future are for good and not for harm. And we lean to trust into that. The other piece of this, and this is where it gets a little bit more murky, is teneblas, which is, they're the things that get in the way, our blind spots of our consciousness. When we just notice in our mind, we think, I know I should trust this promise of God, even though I'm terribly grieving right now because life has changed so much. Or because church has changed. I mean, we're doing this on Zoom, right? You're not able to meet in person, and there's some attachment to letting go of that in person. That is teneblas, because we like being together. You know, I spent the first 2.5 months totally isolated with myself, away from grandchildren and my adult children. And we finally came to the conclusion there's some risk. We're going to have to pick and choose here. And so we decided to open that way up for visitation. But that's all about our attachment. So we're going to get to that in a moment. But you need to hear the two different ways. One is just this murky, muddy mystery of God, the hiddenness, like that first picture we showed about the rocks and the stream. We know the living water of Christ flows through our lives. We just can't see it. Often we can't feel it. And so we're uncertain in times that it's really there. Can we trust it? And teneblas, when we have that blindness in our conscious awareness. So that the dark night of the soul that we're talking about, this pandemic that feels so scattered, really is a way of opening total love, total healing, and liberation of ourselves. Any thoughts on that, Dale?
Yeah, we do. I was thinking how badly I think most of us, I think I can say that in a most of a sense, do with the unknowing.
Yeah.
The obscurity We like to know how things are going to happen and when they're going to happen. And we actually usually have a plan for how that is going to be. And so we trust in that plan. And in these moments, thankfully, actually, I'm going to say for myself, I've had to wrestle with trusting in God when I can't see that my plan is the way I had thought of it is going to work anymore. So
right.
I think I hear that from other people too, that they struggle with.
Yes. I mean, we really like that control aspect, even though it's an illusion.
Yes.
We think we have control, you know, but
I never thought it was an illusion.
Right. That's how I lived. That's right. Oh, so what we're going to do is look at finding ways of being liberated from what we're attached to. One of the quotes says, the darkness of the soul is a secret way God not only liberates us from our attachment and idolatry, but also brings us to the realization of our true nature. And what is our true nature? But we are named God's beloved ones. I mean, that in the image side of us, that we are loved purely just because we're created perfectly as we are of who we are in God, our true nature. So what are attachments? Remember the story, the resurrection story, get at the Gospel of John 21. So we've already gone through crucifixion. Jesus has already risen on Easter and in fact has shown himself several other places. Here we have it, 21, where Jesus fixes breakfast on the beach for the guys. Remember, all the guys went back to go fishing long and they caught nothing. And Jesus says, oh, cast your nets over to the other side. And they pull in this great big long haul. But by the time they get back there with all of these fish, Jesus already has fish over the charcoal grill and is cooking breakfast. He and Peter start a conversation. The conversation begins like this. Jesus says to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? More than what? 3 times Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. My gosh, I'm going crazy. I've already answered it. Yes, Lord, I love you. But it's this more than these that are attachments. What does Peter love more than Jesus? Is he attached to the fact that he still is feeling guilt and shame about denying Jesus 3 times in the courtyard when Jesus was taken under custody and was arrested? Can he kick himself for that? Is he loving being back and fishing more than he loves Jesus? Is he back more with his family now? There can be good attachments, really, really good things. I mean, like, I love my grandchildren. I love my children. I even love the ministry that I do. However, do I love them more than Jesus? Ooh, that becomes a tough rub. We like it when our attachments are bad habits and we want to kick the bad habit and get over that. We're more willing to settle them and let go of them. Any thoughts, Dale?
Sorry, I was muted and we had to move.
You were.
So that threw me off. No, I like that whenever you do hear, Peter say, or the question come to him about, do you love me more than these? The these, like you said, is never really defined. So that leaves it wide open for any of us to put ourselves in that position and say, what is it that I put ahead of, like you said, ahead of Jesus? Or what is it that really needs to be examined in my own life? That, where are my energies toward love focused?
Oh, I like that phrase. Where are my energies toward love focused?
Your next book.
Because that's what, my next book. Oh, yeah, get in line. So, but that's what Jesus is asking, right? where are you putting your energy for love? Is it to Jesus the most or something else? Yeah, nice way. I like that phrase. Thanks. So all of this always involves liberating the inner being of ourself. And that involves a relinquishment, letting go of those kind of attachments. So this is that hidden transformation that's going on. We use the word transfiguration sometimes because it's like that metamorphosis of that butterfly. What happens inside that cocoon is hidden frees us from compulsions, addiction, bad habits, frees us from our drivenness. I don't know about you, but I have a tendency toward workaholism sometimes. And so it's letting go of that. So there's room for God. So our love, we've listed down several of those kind of hidden things. But the reality is we cannot liberate ourselves. And often, and I've done this more times than I care to count, we sabotage ourselves in that moment as we move toward freedom. We almost become afraid of that success. We start down that path, we become overwhelmed, feel discouraged, we feel like a failure, we want to give up. Or sometimes our cultural voices try to be so much louder than the whisper of God. Those things are so vital as we move through those things. That leads us to this new place of awakening and freedom, so that we have the ability to allow God to transform us, transfigure us on the inside, just like that butterfly. Caterpillar goes into that cocoon. God does this amazing transformation, and out comes a butterfly. But I wonder if that was really comfortable for the butterfly to really be transformed. I wonder if there was ever resistance. I wonder what the butterfly had to let go of. The caterpillar had to let go of to become a butterfly in a way of attachments.
Right, the caterpillar has to be all in.
All in. All in.
There's no.
There is no holding back. Yeah. And so, then I wonder about that butterfly. Does the butterfly ever think before it's out of that cocoon, well, how am I going to walk on this ground? My legs are gone. All it ever experienced before was crawling across the ground. And now it's going to be flying. So that's the process of what we're looking at through the pandemic and this time of disorientation and chaos, is that we try to get ways of finding new freedom. I love this Dalai Lama quote from Joe May's book. Although attempting to bring about world peace through internal transformation of individuals is difficult, it is the only way. It's all one person, one heart at a time. Any other things about that before we start looking at our practices, Dale, that you want to highlight?
No, that's fine.
Okay, then we'll just go ahead. What I'd like us to do is kind of accumulate to some of those concepts that either using the butterfly or the river where we didn't see the rocks, where we didn't see that river flowing through, or some of the other pictures that we saw, and wonder about where you are in this obscura time, this hiddenness time of pandemic. How is God's grace sweeping over you? The song is Water, River, Spirit, Grace. Your microphones are muted. She'll sing it through once and then come in with accompaniment. Sing your heart out with your microphones muted. We can all sing at home and celebrate how God loves us.
Yes, be sure your mics are muted, everybody.
Water, river, spirit, grace, sweep over me. Sweep over me, recarve the depths your fingers traced in sculpting me, in sculpting me. Water, river, spirit grace, sweep over me, sweep over me, recarve the depths your fingers traced in sculpting me, in sculpting me. Water, river, spirit grace, sweep over me, sweep over me, recarve the depths your fingers traced in sculpting me, in sculpting me.
So if we're filled with the presence of God, looking to notice more consciously the hiddenness of God, one of the fun ways that I find to help us do that is by looking at the hidden picture from a Highlights magazine. So take a look at the picture on your screen, and when you find one of those little pictures, not just the bunnies at the beach, but something else that might be hidden in that picture, just go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us what you find. And I'll try to point it out for you. Anybody see any hidden things in this picture?
There's a golf club.
A golf club. Yes, see, here's the head of it. It's right down here. The handle. Thank you. Very nice. What else do you see?
There's the coffee cup.
The coffee cup right up here in the umbrella. Yes. Anything else you see? Let me give you a hint. So in this picture, there's a push pen and a bell and a safety pin and a golf club. We found that. Pencil, magnifying glass, fish hook, musical notes, artist brush, toothbrush, nail, teacup. Sometimes when we're looking for the hiddenness of God, we need extra help. We need somebody to companion us, to walk beside us and help us notice. We need prayer, we need music. That's what these are. So with this, when you see that, what do you find now? What else can you see in here?
There's the paintbrush.
A paintbrush. Let's see, it's up at the top. Yeah. Very good. What is this? Anybody see what this is right here? Have you already brushed your teeth today? The toothbrush is right there.
The safety pin on the book.
The safety pin on the top of the book. Yeah. Yeah, I know, Dale, you're a singer. The music notes are right in this guy's shorts. You know, we've got this one right here. Got a fish hook, magnifying glass down here.
Chair.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that one. What?
The nail behind the chair.
Oh yeah, the nail right behind the chair here. Yes. So see, even when we have those things, it's still difficult. But when we add yet another layer of putting community with us, praying together and listening for us, helping us discern, just like these pictures are, now we know what we're matching to. Now they're a whole lot easier. That bell is always so hard to find, but when we know what it looks like here, we know, is it easier? Are we able to find this bell when we see it? Or the push pin we haven't found yet? The bell is so difficult, but right here by the bunny, between the ball and the bunny's face is that bell. And down at the base of the sandcastle is that push pin. So think about the tools that we use in finding this. We have to open up our mind enough for some imagination to realize there are hidden pictures in this bunny picture. It's not just bunny at the beach, but there's some hidden things in there. We have to let that imagination go and lean into the trust that it's really there. And then we do things like these words privately on our own. We read our scriptures, we have our prayer, we go to worship, we're in community, we do small groups. But then when we come together with all that we are in community and see the greatest objects of God, that's when some of that hiddenness is most revealed to us. Any other skills that you think of that you needed to find those pictures? I think we needed one another. I needed somebody to point out for me where the safety pin was on the book or the golf cart. See how we assist one another through this process.
I think it helps also to know what you're looking for so that you can recognize it when you see it somewhere.
I know. Isn't that awesome? So how can we know what we're looking for in God? We know with the hidden picture what it was like, but with God, we have to be so practiced in our spiritual disciplines and our prayer practices so that our heart does in fact recognize God rather than our just mind saying, I just made that up. I think I pushed it away. That wasn't really God, was it? No, I'm not going to rely on that. Yeah, that, Cheryl, is a great point. You know, that we need to be practiced up enough to be able to recognize God. Thank you. Any other tools? Maybe I moved that slide a little bit too quickly. Any other tools from this picture that helped us? Okay, so moving on. When we open up to that new perspective, some things happen. Dale talked earlier about that we have a loss of control, which is why that hiddenness is so hard, because we become fearful and we feel very vulnerable. Those are common causes of resistance. Our fear kicks in. When we can control the situation, we cannot control this pandemic. People are going to get sick. And who's going to get sick? It's not up to us. We can be as cautious as we can. We can be as vigilant as we can by washing our hands, not touching our face, and my eyes just itching me terribly now. But all of these things, we can do what we can do, but the mystery of that pandemic is beyond us. And it makes us feel very vulnerable. And so that's where it comes into really needing to lean in to God. What kind of resistance have you noticed within self or community to this pandemic? Have you noticed within yourselves? I like that picture that my daughter sent me about a time when it was flooding near her house. Look at how high up that water is on that signpost. I think that's what this fear and loss of control and feeling vulnerable feels like. Because we have to become consciously aware of God to be able to lean into that kind of trust. And we do that, it is seeing God beyond the surface. It's a matter of perspective. This one optical illusion here, have you seen this old woman, this young woman? Which one do you see first when you look at this picture? An old woman or a young woman? Anybody can open up their microphone and let me know.
Young woman.
A young woman. So this would be her chin down here and her eyes right over here, the hair, her ear. So where's anybody see the old woman first?
I did.
You did? So all of a sudden the choker necklace for the young woman becomes the old woman's mouth. And what was her chin becomes the nose. What was an ear becomes an eye. What was a nose becomes eyelashes, and the other eye over here. And her hair is still the same. And this is her scarf out here. Yeah. The thing is, when you start looking for that picture, it takes imagination to be able to see the other perspective. Often we just get stuck seeing one perspective in this picture and not the other. Take a look at this clown over here or this tree. What do you see first when you see this picture? Go ahead and unmute when you see something. Anything that you see when you first look at that picture, what do you see?
A face.
A face.
I saw the face first.
Face, yes. They're talking about here's the outline shape of the face, goes right by the tree all the way up. 2 eyes in the middle. And this woman's coat is the nose with a mustache down here and the mouth. But this is also a woman standing here in front of these buildings in the back and the tree in the foreground here. So it really is a matter of perspective. Look at this picture. What do you see when you take a look at this?
A baby.
A baby, I know, new life. Isn't it awesome? You know, the first time I saw this picture, all I saw was the couple standing and looking at the lake and a nice tree. And then I start seeing the baby's feet in that tree and the knees. And this is an in utero baby. So the hands are there and face. So this is a baby in the womb of new life. That's what changing perspective does for us. Gives us new life perspective in that obscura, hidden darkness that we can see. So you all have sent some pictures in, and we're going to take some time of silence. When I show you the picture, we'll have about 40 seconds of silence, thinking about what I ask you, the question that I ask you about the picture. For example, when we open these up, what we're doing is having our heart cracked all the way open, just like that plant is on the side. That's where fertile new ground comes. Our heart can break like jagged pieces. This pandemic, all the social unrest, all of these things can break our heart because we have been living in justice with one another. We have been living in fear of who's going to get sick next. We have lost things of our income, our jobs, our security. We can have jagged, sharp edges of our heart that pierce others, flash out in anger. Or we come over here to the right-hand side of the screen with a heart broken open. Like if you make your fingers, hold your hands together in the shape of a heart, and now break it all open so that your palms are together. And in that kind of all the way open broken heart is where the presence of God rises up, that new life, that new baby life. And that's what we're doing when we look at these pictures, looking for having our heart broken all the way open. So take a look at this picture before you, and we will sit for 30 seconds in silence, wondering about the pandemic. What kind of darkness has descended in our culture or in your life or community? What do you notice about the hiddenness of the pandemic? Here's what I found. What do you see in this picture when you first even look at it? I'm so intrigued with this picture. The shadows and the light in it. What kind of things do you notice that could be revealed by God for the murkiness of this pandemic?
Oh, the crashing down of all those logs and the power that brought those logs to that place.
Yeah, what power brought the logs there? It's a total crash down, isn't it? Those logs don't look like anything like they used to when they look like trees. Yeah, thank you. What of their perspective?
Some of the trees are left at the top of the mountain or hill.
Yeah. Some of that life, that the trees, even though kind of in the shadows back there, there is still life left, still firmly rooted on the mountain of God. Yeah, I love it. Good thoughts.
How foggy or unclear the picture is in the background?
Yeah. We can see the chaos and the disorientation of these logs very clearly up front, can't we? But it's foggy and unclear in the back. That hiddenness of God is that mystery. I mean, like the gentleman just said, that life, the tree lives on that ridge up there, they're just kind of in that murky shadow back there. Yeah. It depicts that hiddenness of God for us. Anything else about this picture?
We're kind of looking at it like from the perspective of being on the ground or just slightly above ground, kind of looking up and out.
Mm-hmm. And so what do you see when you look up and out that way?
Well, it's interesting that the first tall object that we see closer to us, I just keep thinking of an old woman leaning on a cane on the ground or something. That's what my eyes keep going to.
Almost depicting that fragility of life, right? That old woman leaning on a cane there. Wow. And yet in our hearts when the consciousness knows that even in that murkiness, God's promises can be trusted. What may appear like fragility of life, that old woman leaning on a cane, could just be the awesome next step to getting closer to what is hidden in the fog. Good job. Let's take a look at another picture and see. This one comes to us from Shelley. So in the pandemic, in these months that have been going on since March, with civil protest and the pandemic, how has God shimmered? How have you noticed God's shimmering light?
I keep seeing the children in our neighborhood. They will congregate, and I know they're all trying to be good about it, but they still congregate and laugh and yell and just exude happiness still during all this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lynn. What a shimmering gift, the children gathering and laughing. I love it. What other ways do we see God's shimmering light through this season?
It looks like there's movement in the water, but in two different directions.
Ah, yes, it does. It almost has a tic-tac-toe kind of board over here, like weaving. And this seems to be going somewhere. Yeah. So what does that tell you about the God shimmering light with the way that those ripples are going?
That there's not only one path, that there's
Oh my gosh. There's not just one path, but there's multiple ways that God is loving in God's people in this moment. Yes. Wonderful. What would be one of those pathways that we see God loving on God's people in this moment? You know, the television commercials have been pretty overwhelmingly, especially in the beginning, about thanking the first responders and the frontline people. And I watched the God light start shimmering even brighter in my daughter, who works at the hospital as a nurse in ICU. And moving through that fear of, holy goodness, what is happening with her first COVID patients, to now almost becoming a routine way of loving on people and embracing them even with COVID-19. So for me, watching that maturation of her spirit has been a real God shimmering moment, that fear no longer leads her life.
Is the use of creativity in how we try to keep doing what we want to do to care for each other, like having drive-by birthday parties.
Awesome. Yes. The creativity has been phenomenal. I mean, I've had people had drive-by retirement parties, drive-by birthday parties, you know, moving things out of enclosed spaces into that open air space so that we have more of that. Those are wonderful thoughts. Yes. because we've been gifted with that creative mind. We're kind of stuck in how we do our birthday parties, that they all needed to look like our expectations. Yes. That piece of that creativity is the God shimmering piece. Let's take a look at another photo. This one by Heather. So when we look at this, imagine all that's been going on in the pandemic, or just looking at the picture. How do you see God's presence in this picture?
Well, I think if it's a sunrise, it's like the promise of a new day, and it's starting off in glorious, majestic color.
Wonderful, yes. The majestic color of a glorious new beginning. Wow.
I kind of like how the cloud is like embracing everything. So like putting its arms around the world.
There is energy in that cloud, isn't it? That is just embracing everything. That is really cool, yes. You know, I take those that energy of that cloud a little bit further. See this? Can you see where my pointer is right here? What if that's an eye with the nose here, another eye, and then we have this elongated face that comes down here with a mouth in here? Not only just the arms embracing, but what if God is looking down, looking upon us, looking within us with amazing love? I find great hope in this picture. Any other thoughts?
Well, I think too, if it's a sunset, it's more of to me, it's representing the transition of a busy day to a soothing, calming, entering into and transitioning into night.
Yes.
And it's kind of a good night, I love you kiss almost, as we go into the dark period.
Yes. And I find it intriguing that there's some people down here in the lower right corner. They are almost hidden to our sight because we're so drawn to the magnificence and the glory of the light in the clouds. And yet on this expansive beach, there's these lives that are down here, held in God's heart.
Brenda, I want to interject just as the task you gave me earlier. There's about 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So this one comes to us from Dale. How do we notice God's presence in this picture?
Their expressions.
The expressions on their face. Yes.
They just make me smile.
They do just make you smile. There's like energy dancing in their eyes, huh?
I see joy in this picture.
Joy, yes. Absolutely. So we move to find the hiddenness of God, not just looking at nature scenes, but looking at one another. We begin to see that instead of seeing people just on the outside of ourselves with what we have with our eyes and our fingernail color and our skin tones and the clothes we wear, but we start seeing the risen Christ in the other as well. And then Karen brought us this photo. What would be the one word that you would conclude about the pandemic with this photo?
There's hope.
There's hope. Mm-hmm. Anybody else have another word?
If this is a picture I sent you.
Yeah, it's the same last name. Yes, it is.
The picture I sent you, I took it in March, just before we came home. Within days of coming home, we were in quarantine.
Wow.
And I look at this picture often because it's not only hope, it's double hope.
It is double hope. I wanted to point out that extra rainbow right back there. Yes. And what a gift that God gave it to you right before we went into isolation and quarantine. That the darkness is not going to have the last word. That hiddenness, yeah. So the question becomes, what new shape is God inviting you to in this season? Just as the potter with the clay, so that we can become the best God self, image of God, that God desires us to be. So how do we as community assist in sharing and affirming, revealing God's hidden presence during the 3 stages of awakening? I happen to think that awakening is going on right now, not just in our personal lives or our national life, but in our global life. There's 3 stages on the screen up there. One is disorientation, and we've certainly seen a lot of that come across the news, with from the quarantines, the illness, to the deaths, to the violence and the protests. And then we find new ways of looking for and seeking the fullness of God in our consciousness. And the greater we have, as the Dalai Lama said, one individual at a time, the more and more and more individuals that have a conscious awareness of a new way of doing things in God becomes how that awakening happens. We see awakenings happen in history about every 500 to 1,000 years. So what if we're in that place right now? How can community assist to help us trust that there's a stream of living water between these rocks that we cannot see? I would suggest to us that there are several prayer techniques that can help us increase our trust. I don't know if you've ever done any work, Dale, with any of these with the community or not. But breath prayer is where we would just put a 6 to 8 syllable phrase answering this question. If Jesus were sitting right in front of you in this moment, What is your heart's deepest desire? You whittle that down to a 6 to 8 syllable phrase, not a situational prayer. Even though situational prayers are very important, they would be with Aunt Susie who's in the hospital. That's a situation. Or help me in my financial situation. That's a situation. Those are very imperative prayers. But breath prayers go to the heart. Lead me to the light. Gift me with courage. And we put our favorite name for God together with a breath prayer. And so it would be, Jesus, lead me to the light. Or Abba, Father, open the way. Holy Spirit, grant me courage. All of those are short little things that you can breathe in the Holy Spirit of God, the pneuma or ruha from the Hebrew or the Greek. And then you exhale, just like we get rid of all the stale air within us. We get rid of those attachments that we talked about earlier that keep us from noticing God. So we breathe in the Spirit of God in the prayer and breathe out, releasing all attachments. The center picture talks about walking. We can hook up a breath prayer with our walking, which makes our steps as wobbly as when we first learned how to walk as a toddler, because I don't know about your balance, but for my balance, I don't walk that slow anymore. And to slow me down takes a lot of intention with balance. So, or thinking about every step we make, a sacred word, God, 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 with each step opens up the way within us. I worked for a time in addiction and mental health recovery and did a lot of praying in color with people. And that's another way that the essence of moving a pencil back and forth, literally opens space in the brain for God to come in and give us different perspective. Silence, music, tactile things, having beads or knots, all of those things can open us. When we use these prayer experiences in community, we begin hearing the heart of one another. We're not just sharing the service, but we're sharing the presence of God, opening the way for that hiddenness of God to be revealed through one another's prayers. Any questions about any of those techniques? Have I lost y'all?
Not me.
Oh, good, thank you. I can't see anybody, so I'm hoping they haven't all just taken off and left.
The count is.
But the count is still there, huh? Well, thanks, Dale. That makes me feel better. But these are just some ways that when we are able to get over the resistance of the fear and the vulnerability and the control, and even be willing to share prayer together, community changes in a way that strengthens us to move forward through the obscurity of the unknown, so that we're hearing God's heart within each other as we go forward. So I've left a few minutes after this is our closing, as we think about how we in community can assist one another in taking flight during the most difficult times of unknowing, and lean more into the presence of God. So let that become your prayer as we listen to our closing song, and then we will have a time for questions if you would like.
shelter of the Lord, who abide in his shadow for life. Say to the Lord, my refuge, my rock, in whom I trust, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. The snare of the fowler will never capture you, and famine will bring you no fear. Under his wings, your refuge, his faithfulness, your shield, and he will raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And for to his angels he's given a command to guide you in all of your ways. Upon their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your foot against the stone. Raise you up on eagle's wings, bear you on the breath of dawn, make you to shine like the sun, and hold you in the palm of his hand. And hold you in the palm of his hand.
Let us pray. Holy and amazing God, thank you for being a sure and certain presence in the midst of the mystery of tomorrow. Gift us with ever increasing trust of you, so that we may lean into the next moment of life, releasing all that holds us captive and leaning so far into your love that new life just bursts forth within our lives. We trust you in all ways and know that you gift us with the image of your living Christ, so that we too may be set ablaze with the amazing love of your Holy Spirit. Thank you for this moment in life, for this community of the Open Table Church, for the way that you knit hearts together in your prayer, so that we can claim even more assuredly your amazing love within our lives. In and through your precious name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. So thank you, everyone, for your time. We've got about 10 minutes left, Dale, 7 minutes left for questions.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you.
Whoops,
Could you
sorry.
please repeat what you said?
There goes my phone. No, I can't repeat it. Okay, so if there's any questions beyond Siri that we want to lift up
I'm not
today.
sure I understand.
All right, Dale, well then I guess it's all yours.
I guess so. I don't have anything to add to that, actually. I was making sure that I got responses from the question about the recording permission.
Oh, yeah.
You, it seems like. So I was going to welcome Abby Tackett, who is Heather's daughter, but they are both already had to go, so I will connect with her. Brenda, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Always.
Fun.
I appreciate what you bring to this work of noticing God, and it's something that I need reminded of myself. So
It was
We do.
a morning. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good. Thank you for your participation. Good. That was great.